Here now is Jen Psaki, traveling press secretary for the Obama campaign, and Sean Spicer, communications director with the Republican National Committee. Jen, I want to, not for nothing, F-bombs here and there. I've been known to use the word. My daughter had a little problem with it. She's 12, and she said if she used it, she'd get in trouble. Is it right for the president to be sort of putting the stamp of approval on that for? But that's not what I want to talk about. You seem excited, as a lot of Democrats do, about what happened last week. My only question is, 18 months of divisiveness and a lot of political capital, a rout in the House for Democrats, spawning the Tea Party. And now it's not just 18 months. It's now, what, 3.5 years. You finally hear it's constitutional. You've got unemployment above 8% for this entire presidency. And this is something to celebrate, that we're still talking about health care reform and saying it's constitutional?
Well, Joe, look, for decades, millions of people have gone without health insurance. The costs of health care have been rising for decades as well. So, yes, it's been a long road. I think everybody's happy that now 3 branches of government have agreed that it's constitutional, and we can move forward with implementation. And that's what we want to focus on.
You know it's not over yet, Jen, and now that it's a tax, it opens the possibility of reconciliation. Live by the sword, die by the sword. If Romney were to be elected, you don't need 60 votes anymore. You only need 51. Sean Spicer, you want to talk about just using the F word, or you want to talk about whether it's something to celebrate or not?
Well, I mean, whether you talk about the language or the activity, in terms of, Leader Pelosi had a party that night, the tweets that came out from the Democratic National Committee and to some extent the president, I'm not sure what they're celebrating, because this has been one of the biggest inhibitors to job creation and drags on the economy as people look forward and say, I don't know how I'm going to implement this. I don't know if I can afford to hire more people with Obamacare. You have families trying to think, concerned that this is going to limit their choices. It's going to put doctors or the government between doctors and patients. I don't know why they're celebrating it. But the bigger question I would have is, are they willing to campaign on it? Because I wouldn't, celebrate on it, and I don't think too many Democrats are eager to campaign on it. I think it polls pretty poorly for the exact reason that I just outlined, because it's bad for the economy, it's bad for jobs, and frankly, it's bad for health care. It limits the choices that people are going to have, and so I'm not sure what they're celebrating or why they are.
Jen, this is Dan here. I'm obviously sympathetic to Sean's perspective here.
I hear you are.
But he raises a good question. I mean, Democrats didn't campaign on their votes for Obamacare in the 2010 midterms. Do you expect President Obama or congressional Democrats to campaign on it this time around? And if not, why not?
Well, Dan, the president did this, as he said last week, because it was the right thing to do, morally, and because, as we know, the costs of health care have been increasing for a long, long time, not because it was the right politics. The president's been talking about in his campaign, and we'll all be talking about, the benefits that have already come into play. 3.1 million young people who are now covered. In 2 years, 29 million people, I should say, sorry, who have pre-existing conditions will be covered. So there are a lot of benefits.
The bigger problem, though, Jen, the problem is, I apologize, but I think the problem is that these young people need it because they can't find a job under this president's economy. The seniors are getting concerned because it would cut $500 billion out of Medicaid, or Medicare, rather. So I think when you actually start peeling back, and the trillions of debt that is getting piled on because of the costs are going to explode on this. So I think families are concerned, small businesses are concerned, and so I think overall, you look at the different demographics, there's a lot of people out there that are very concerned about the implementation of this.
Well, first, we all know fact-wise that in the first year it's going to lower the deficit, or it's going to be lower the deficit by $100 billion in the second decade, first decade, and the second decade by $1 trillion. So those are the facts.
If you buy that logic, I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you.
Well, look, I'm basing it on what independent analysts say, not on talking points. So, I will also say that, look, this has been a tough day for Mitt Romney because, as we all know and we all saw, Eric Fernstrom, one of his top political advisors, came out and said it's not a tax, it was a penalty. We all knew that.
It had to be a tax or it's unconstitutional. So we know that.
But with all due respect, then, Jen, why don't you answer the question? Because you all campaigned and said it's not a tax, it's not a tax. The president sent the Solicitor General to the Supreme Court and said, wait, in order to get around the Commerce Clause, it is a tax. And then once the only reason that it was deemed unconstitutional is because the argument was that it was a tax.
So we're out of time.
Unconstitutional or it's a tax.
Quick response, Jen. We're out of time.
Look, I will say this. The penalty that's in the Affordable Care Act was put in there because we know that millions of people have been covering freeloaders for decades.
All right, well,
it was based on Mitt Romney's own plan.
Jen
so
Psaki,
it impacts less than 1% of people.
You didn't read it very well.
All right, Jen, thank you. Sean Spicer, thank you. We appreciate it. We always got somewhere to go and more to do. Thank you, though.